Hello and welcome back to the channel. I'm Loudguns, and today we're going to be starting a new series called Getting Organised. So each time we're going to take a career path. So today's one is going to be focused on exploration and science, and then we're going to build 3 fleets for it. So one for a 5-person organisation, one for a 30-person, and one for a 100-person. So for anyone who's brand new to the game, organisations or orgs are basically guilds or clans of Star Citizen. So they can come in all shapes and sizes. There's no reason that you can't just join up with a group of your real life mates and have a good time. But also, mega orgs exist with hundreds of members and ships. So it really comes down to what you think is going to suit you best. So just before we get started though, I do want to just put one big disclaimer on here. I'm not encouraging anyone to go out and buy a load of ships. If anything, I actually think that by doing this and sort of having gone through the different fleets that I would build for different sizes of orgs, it really hit home 2 things. One of them was you probably don't need as many ships as you think you need. Don't worry, much like everyone, I think my wallet was in some serious danger during Invictus and Alien Week. But once you look at sort of how many people the ships will take to crew effectively, you probably are better off sort of with a smaller, more focused fleet yourself. And the second thing really was how great organisations are. So once you can start sort of spreading ships out amongst different people, that really, it doesn't need to be like this huge expense on one person to buy a huge hangar that covers all the bases. Orgs not only give you people to play with, but they also give you a way to pool your resources so that you can sort of create a greater whole than the sum of the parts. So just before we get going and take a look at the fleets, 2 shameless plugs from me. One is if you are looking for people to play with, if you're playing solo at the moment or in a small group, and you'd like to get a feel for sort of bigger group play, then the link to our Discord is just down in the video description below. Feel free to come and say hi. It's more of a community, but we also are planning an org for when the game goes live. So feel free to just pop in and say hello. And the second is if you're a new player and you're considering getting a Star Citizen package, maybe just watching stuff like this to see if it's a game of interest to you, then if you do create an account, consider using my referral code. It gets you an extra 5,000 credits to begin with, and it helps me out too. That's just up on the screen now, but it's also in the video description as well. So without further ado, let's get on and take a look at the fleets. So to start with, I've got the fleet that I'd put together for if you just had 5 people in your org, just a small group looking to play together. So really, this is centered on getting yourself to a Carrack. It's one of the most fantastic multi-role ships that we've got available in the PU at the moment. And what I'd look to do is to make sure you get sort of a couple of add-ons for that almost. Get yourself a C8 Pisces that you can pop in the hangar, and nurse a rover, so that you can take that out for drives around planets. And then I've also sort of put a Freelancer Der on the side, so that's the exploration-focused variant of the Freelancer series. So one of the things you do sort of find once you're in an org is that sort of your org might be sort of 50 members, 60 members, whatever, but who's actually online at any one time? And this is sort of going to be a problem even for relatively small groups. So I know from playing with my friends in various games that, you might have 6, 7 people at peak times, but then you also want to be able to do something when just you and one other person manage to get on. Everybody else is busy. So having another ship, sort of one ship which is able to take all of you, but another ship which is available for if you've just got a couple of players on, I think would be an ideal approach to take. But really, a lot of your play in exploration as a small group could really focus around the Carrack. It's got a sort of minimum crew of 4, max crew of 6, and I think it really does fulfill that whole Star Trekking across the universe type vibe. So you've got the opportunity to take on different roles. You've got sort of a space to have a helmsman, you've got a decent bridge where there are some co-pilot stations and remote turret operators. The ship itself has a couple of additional man turrets. Now, if you're a slightly smaller group, you might want to consider working in some NPCs. There's not been too much released on the idea of NPCs, but we know that we're eventually going to get them. And I think sort of an ideal place to use NPCs is in these sort of man turret operation. Make sure that your human players have the ability to take on some interesting roles, but don't leave some poor guy operating the rear turret on your ship who might never see combat during a play session. That's not going to be the most interesting thing for them, I don't think. But the carrack's going to really give you everything that you need for getting out in the universe, exploring, finding some things like, jump points, new locations on planets, valuable mining spots. So really, as a small group, your main sort of cash flow, if you will, is going to be from finding out information, then probably selling it to info runners or data brokers, so that other organizations who specialize in whatever you found, so if that's sort of a mining claim or a decent ship to salvage, they can come in and they have the right tools for the job to then exploit that resource. So I would probably encourage, there's a sort of idea in businesses called vertical integration. And so if you think about like an oil and gas company, it's like BP, for example. They've got, at the one hand, they pump oil out of the ground, but then as the company gets bigger, they also move into running pipelines. As the company gets bigger, they deliver it all the way to the petrol forecourt and they sell it directly to you, the customer. So the bigger you are, the more you can vertically integrate, the more you can take on different sort of stages of the business. If you're small though, just probably stay in your lane, stay focused. So you don't want, as a small organization, to be getting loads of ships that might be quite costly to run. And you might want to spend more time doing just the thing that you love. If you guys have decided that your ideal sort of role is exploration, well, do you really want to be just buying sort of salvage ships as well and mining ships as well in order to exploit the resources that you found? Or do you want to sell, take the paycheck for finding the good stuff and then get back out into the black and find some more? So this is a very focused fleet, but it's still definitely going to do all the things you want it to do if you're dedicated explorers. So I just, even though there's all that possibility of widening out the fleet, buying more ships, because ships look really cool, in terms of coming up with a good fleet for your organization, a small, focused one can often actually be superior to a wide but poorly constructed one. So scaling things up slightly, we're going to start looking at a 30-person organization. So if you manage to get a decent group of you together, and you're all going to focus on exploration and science, what would be a sort of good opportunity to enlarge your group? So at this point, I'd look at introducing a bigger ship, the Endeavour. So technically it classes as a capital within exploration, but not all capitals are built the same. It seems to be mostly a sort of calculation based on size and sort of the components that the ship has, as opposed to the amount of crew that it takes to man. So the RSI website's guidance is that the Endeavour is a 3 to 5 person ship, but the main idea around it is that it's highly modular, that you can add these various modules to it to make it perform different roles. So I can't help but think that that number's probably a bit low. That's probably the number of people that you would need on board to crew the positions for flying the ship around, and not necessarily the amount of positions which would be given by the modules once you've got them attached. But this is where I think you can start bringing some vertical integration into your org. So when we were looking at the 5-person org with the carrack that's going to go out and find some stuff in the verse, where do they start? So they're probably going to have to lean on someone for some information as to, which direction should we head in first. But I think with the Endeavour, you're going to be able to start owning more of that value chain. So you're not going to be paying someone for the information on where to go. You can use your telescope module to perform some long range scans, giving you a decent idea on what direction to head. Then if you find something interesting out there, there's a bunch of laboratory modules and a Hadron Collider that you can sort of add to this ship. Just hoping that will make your discoveries more valuable, so that you're not just performing that one niche task anymore. Now as an org, you own the part before and the part that comes after, and you add more value to your discoveries. And one of the great things about being an org is that you don't need to necessarily love every game loop that we're talking about here. So you might purely love going around, driving around in your Carrack, working out how to get down to a planet's surface that might be hazardous and try and find out what's out there. Somebody else in your org might really love the science bit, might really love sort of sitting aboard the Endeavour, performing the long range scans, getting that sort of mini game down however it comes out. So by meeting different people and working together, you end up being sort of greater than the sum of the parts, I would say, is the key message on why getting into an org is a great thing in a game like this. So then to flesh out around this, we've also got a couple of Carracks this time, a couple more freelancer DERs for when smaller groups might want to go out. And I'm also throwing in a Constellation Aquila because I think that ship might have some potential, sort of a bit more subtle than the Carrack. Not so many stations to cover, but might just offer a bit more in terms of scanning potential than, say, the freelancer DER. And it also benefits from having a snub fighter which comes attached to it. So you've still got that sort of extra craft that you could use for exploring a wreck or heading down to a planet's surface. And you can still take the rover along as well. So finally, let's look at how a 100-person org might be able to construct a fleet for exploration and science. So we're going to look at some more vertical integration. They're going to try and own more of the value chain of the exploration game loop, but also a bit of diversification. So, if you've got a fleet of this size, I think it's worth incorporating, for instance, a few combat ships, and it's worth incorporating a bit of logistical support. Moving this many ships around, undoubtedly you're going to get a few dents along the way. So I think once you reach this sort of scale, it's worth looking in-house to try and have the facilities and the capabilities to patch yourselves back up again. But one of the things to start with, I think, is the Kraken, because why have I stuck what a lot of the material sort of suggests as a combat ship at the heart of an exploration fleet? So I think one of the easiest pitfalls to fall into when you're theory crafting is to look at the game as it is now, and not look forward to the game that we hope we're going to get in the future. So I personally am hoping for a fully fledged MMO with maybe not 100 systems like Mr. Roberts promised us once upon a time, but multiple systems with vast travel distances between them. And I think the travel distance is really the thing we're missing from Star Citizen at the moment. Currently my Arrow with its tiny pea-sized fuel tank, as long as I slap an Atlas quantum drive on that, I can make the longest distance in the Stanton system. I can make that jump out to Microtech. But those are not the distances we're talking about going forward. So I think the Kraken is going to provide a great centerpiece to an awful lot of fleets in an awful lot of different sort of industries and areas, because it gives you that ability to transport multiple ships pretty much anywhere you want them. So I sort of view the Kraken as like the base that you're going to put down on a planet that you're going to explore. You can have hangars for your vehicles, you can bring along a variety of ships to get the job done, and then really have a home away from home so that you can spend as long out on the frontier as you like, sort of discovering everything about a potential, moon that you've discovered. Make sure that you get everything mapped out and find everything of value so that you can maximize your profit selling it later. So supporting these efforts, I've also incorporated 2 endeavors this time. Why 2, not 1? And the main reason behind that is the modularity. So while it provides a great deal of flexibility, I think it's actually going to be quite time-consuming and expensive to change modules. I don't think it's something we're going to be strapping our EVA suits on and getting out there with a couple of blowtorches and welders to switch our Hadron Collider for our telescope array. So I think by having sort of 2 endeavors that you could have set up with different modules to support your fleet, that would be a really good way to maximize your effort and your time. The number of characters and Aquilas, sort of, you could just scale those up as well to match the number of people in your org. I think they're probably going to be your workhorses as an exploration org. But diving into some of the other ships that we haven't included further down, because you've got that Kraken to transport smaller vehicles longer distances, I've also included a couple of Pathfinders, so the 2 Terrapins there. So they'd make great sort of wayfinders for your org, maybe sort of spreading out and finding smaller things that your bigger exploration ships might miss. And then also we've got sort of a small logistical element. So I've included a Starfarer to keep your ships refueled, a Apollo medevac just in case anybody gets a scraped knee, and a Vulcan in case anybody puts a dent in that precious Kraken. I've also included a Mercury Starrunner in there, and that's mostly for its data transportation potential. So as an exploration and science guild, your main commodity that you're going to be selling is data. So this is more of the vertical integration so that you don't have to, pay someone to take that to market for you. Make sure you've got a ship that can do it. You might be able to therefore sort of shop around without sending your whole fleet back and forth and really fetch the best price for your data. I'd also look to build in sort of a small combat contingent, so this is all completely down to you guys in terms of what your combat-oriented pilots feel most comfortable in. So I've just picked out a Vanguard, Warden, and a couple of Arrows, but it's more just to give a feel for the fact that you probably want to bring a little bit of sort of military escort to your operation. Some of the exploration you might be doing might be in more dangerous space, and it would probably just help to have a couple of fighters in support. And finally, down in the sort of bottom right of that picture, just a variety, sort of a garage of different land vehicles. So maybe some rovers, some cyclones, a couple of hover bikes and bikes, just to fill in that Kraken and get out exploring planetside. So that was my sort of selections of what I would do for 3 different sized organizations, but I'd be really interested to hear what you all think. So please let me know in the comments down below, or feel free to hop onto Discord and have a chat. And I really like these sorts of theory crafting exercises as almost a starting point for where you might go, and just to kick off a conversation. So thank you very much for watching all the way to the end. If you do like this sort of content, then please consider hitting subscribe to the channel. I'm going to be doing more of these in the future, covering different organizations, different industries, so stay tuned for that. I think these sorts of thought exercises are really useful to put the ships and fleets in the context of how many people you'll need to effectively run them. I know a lot of people will be thinking AI blades and NPCs, but just to keep in mind, I personally think that yes, you can use blades to automate some of your turret systems, but chances are that that won't be the only blades available. So if you are using them to man turrets, you might miss out on a whole bunch of other features that you could use that blade slot for. And similarly, sort of NPC crew, I think probably going to be quite expensive to hire. So you'll probably want to use some NPC crew to man some of your turrets because, like I said before, manning a turret which might not shoot at anyone in anger all day is probably not a good play session for any human player. But I think sort of with particularly the bigger ships, you are going to need an element of a decent human crew to run it well and maximize sort of the profit and the enjoyable gameplay you can get out of it. And for those people who have maybe been considering it, joining an organization in Star Citizen is probably one of the best things you can do. The game is great fun as a solo player, but it's organizations and making friends with new people and getting out to go and do things together. That's where the game really comes alive. So if you haven't already, I'd consider finding even a sort of casual group to just play with regularly. So with all that said, thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.